Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker Fan Sports Show.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, Matt's Rule Edition.
Yeah.
Second episode of this.
Second
Matt.
episode, just sort of an impromptu kind of deal. I mean, we were planning on drinking. That's not unplanned. It was just this basketball win that kind of surprised everybody. So, hey, red beer's up.
Red beers are up. I'm drinking out of my Hill Varsity Club glass here. We have a victory here tonight to talk about.
Well, first.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
But yes, an away game, an underdog victory.
Up 5 at half, up the entire second half.
I mean, I was pretty impressed with the team. I've been impressed with the team with a lot of the games I've watched this year, but it's just one of those things. It's like, when do I get excited? Like, when do I really but it might not be that kind of year, but I do appreciate the level and the effort I've seen every game. I feel like I've seen a lot of effort defensively. Sometimes shots are falling, sometimes they're not, but man, when they do, we're fun to watch.
Well, what did Beller right there? Our buddy Beller, that's he's a big time Husker basketball fan. He's been a critic, as so have we, by the way, of Hoiberg. But even tonight, he gave some credit there. I don't know. You said a little earlier.
He mentioned the coaching. He said it's just a really good credit where credit is due. That was one hell of a coaching job, and that's from Beller, and that is high praise from him because he has been a little bit critical of Fred, and for good reasons. We've talked about him with Sip before about him. He's not a casual fan. He's a hardcore Husker basketball fan. So, yeah. I hope Fred does turn it around for those guys because I don't want to go through a coaching change. I think ideally we wouldn't have a coaching change and Fred could figure this out. But
we said all along you got to get to postseason this season. That was important to us. And right now we're 13-14. A year ago we were 10-22. So we already have 3 more wins than a year ago. 13-14. You got to get to at least above 500 to get to the NIT, which to me that's the bare minimum of showing that progress. And now we're coming home for 2 straight games, Sunday against Maryland, and then the cellar dweller Minnesota, who we've already beaten on the road. Yeah. They come here. You hate to say these are must-win games, but man, they're must-win games. You got to get above 500, and what an opportunity all of a sudden.
Yeah, okay, yeah, 3 games at home after this kind of a surprise victory. That is a lot of momentum, and it'd be nice to see us actually ride a little bit of wave of momentum. We've been able to do that in basketball a couple times. This would be a good time to do it. It's funny that is the NIT you have to be over 500.
Yeah, basically just you have to have
so that's like bowl eligibility
correct
for basketball. Okay, well that's fair. I mean, they haven't been that way for I don't know in Fred's entire time.
The entire time that Fred's been here, we haven't been there. So
has he always been under 500?
Yeah, and wow. By quite a bit. I mean, that's the thing. And I mentioned we were 10-22 last year, and that was finishing the season strong. We won like 3 of our last 4 games, winning a couple games on the road like we did against Wisconsin and everything. So, I mean, that's where they're at right now. You really want to talk about a turnaround. I was in Kansas City over the weekend with the family, and we were doing the Great Wolf Lodge thing, but I was sitting in the hotel room watching on my phone the game against Wisconsin at home, and we were down 17 points in the second half.
Wow.
So to think about where we were at that moment, with about 15 minutes left in the second half, to be down 17 points, I mean, things are looking bleak. That's a bad looking
huge deficit.
You lose that game, and now you go on the road to Rutgers and don't play well tonight, and you can see where things could have gone downhill. And instead, they've turned it around, take it to overtime, win by double digits against Wisconsin, and then to win tonight the way they did. This is really impressive. If nothing else, Husker fans, Nebrasketball fans, show up on Sunday. You have been showing up. I don't need to tell you to. You have been showing up. You did against Penn State. You did against Wisconsin, these weekend home games. But, man, let's show up. Let's fill up that place, fill up the bank for these next 2 games and get 2 more wins, and let's get above 500.
That would be wonderful. And that place is so different when the fans are really going, and it really provides an element for that team, I think, that can kind of push it beyond maybe what it's capable of. But we'll see. The NIT would be great. That'd be to me, the way the season kind of started off and the little lulls in between, I just thought, probably more of the same. Ain't going to get much better. But it really has changed. It really has changed. So fingers crossed. I'm hopeful for it. I wouldn't mind to make a little run this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, we weren't planning on doing this, but let's throw up what the next couple of shows are going to be here. Tomorrow night, we do have Adam McClintock on, co-founder of Matrix Analytical, college football consultant to head coaches, ADs, football ops personnel. You can find him on Twitter at CFB_professor. And also a week from tomorrow, Wednesday, February 22nd at 8 o'clock, we'll have Cody Glenn on, former Black Shirt and IBAC, Texas high school football coach. He was He was in an article talking about Dr. Susan Elsa, who came down there and was speaking. Okay. So, and he's also your mother's favorite player, according to his Twitter account. So we'll have him on Fan Forum next week. And then, of course, as usual, we have our friends at Smack and Smooch. They have created a new Redcast store. You can use this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. You can use this QR code, and it'll take you to the website. You can find them at Smack and Smooch as well. But we have the links on our social media site. And really, Redcasters, we'd love it. Go out, purchase some of this merch. We don't make much off it. What it is really for us is I just love seeing the Redcast gear out there. We've given away a bunch of it with the different giveaways that we've done, and it's so cool. And I've seen people walking around and wearing hats and shirts.
That is cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So, anyways, let's get back to what we're talking about, Mac. And I know we were talking about doing a match rule at some point, anyways, and tonight just turned out to be perfect for it. Let's talk a little football here, off season, how it's going, what you're thinking. And I want to start with something, kind of a little theme I've had in my head. And it's the little things versus the basics.
Okay.
Now, under Coach Frost, there's a lot of times that we lost a bunch of games, a bunch of one-score games, the most of any team in the country the last 4 years, without really a close second.
Historic. Yes.
And each time we'd lose, there were little things,
little
things. And I say that in quotation marks, little things like special teams, little things like turnovers, penalties and pre-snap penalties and things that they would kill us at times. Right. But they were little things.
Missing field goals.
Yeah. Missing field goals. Right. And we were told they were little things.
Right. And this is always little.
And they're always little until they come up and bite you. Then I was reading, I think it might've been Tunnel Talk I think it was Tunnel Talk last week. And there was an article, or they talked about Coach Rule recruiting in Bellevue, and he was at Bellevue West. And the Bellevue West head coach, his wife is a teacher at Bellevue East. Okay. So anyways, Rule and a couple of the guys on his staff were at Bellevue West. They were meeting with the Bellevue West coach, and the Bellevue West coach gives them some cookies from his wife and says, "Hey, my wife, she works at Bellevue East. She made these cookies." Well, anyways, this staff doesn't just go to one school and that's it. And of course, they were already planning to go to Bellevue East and meet with those coaches. But when they go to Bellevue East, Matt Rule finds the wife. She's teaching a class, walks into the class to thank her for making them. Of course, that creates a big scene because everyone wants to see the head coach. But the way that what they quoted it, or the way they said it on Tunnel Talk, was that the little things that he did the little things. That's a little thing. And I would agree. A little thing, it's a nice touch. He didn't have to do it, but it's just being a good person. Your mom raises you a certain way. Go and say thank you when someone does something. That's a little thing. And a little thing to me isn't jumping off sides or missing field goals. A little thing is doing those.
Right.
And then the basics and being good at the basics are the things that the staff, if they're worth what we're going to be paying them, is what they're going to be getting us to do here in spring ball and so on, is we're going to be good at all those basics of
all
football.
The basics. Yeah. Hammer down because it really has been the basics that have tripped us up. It wasn't like complicated shifts that we could never get right, or we didn't know the playbook or anything like that. It was sometimes legal formation. Sometimes a guy would jump off sides. Sometimes a guy didn't know the snap count. It kind of an endless array of stupid things, but they were all basics. You can call them little things, you can call them basics, but you're right, they were basic fundamental football. It's the stuff that you don't have to worry about if you're taking care of what you should be taking care of throughout the week, throughout fall camp and beyond. So we haven't seen anything from this team yet. We've seen a few workout videos, nothing crazy, and I'm really, regardless of all the momentum and all the goodwill I have towards this staff, I still will not get that excited over like workout videos. They just, to me, that's the most, it's just so hard to judge what's actually going on. Does it look cool? Yeah. Do they look bigger? Yeah. I mean, but that's happened every single year I've ever watched those. So, and they're doing front squats now. Who knew? But that's okay. it does look like they're working hard. That's what all you can do right now is kind of evaluate how hard they're working right now. It seems as though they're working hard right now. Spring ball is really not that far away.
No,
it really isn't. We'll get started up with that before too long, and I'll be really interested to see what kind of access the media gets and like what kind of images they put out to see. Because I would like to see some of those freshmen to see what they're looking like a Gabe Irving, to see what he's looking like coming in. And the line, like, does the line look any different? Because I felt like that was something going into last year, or something I saw a lot last year was just a lot of lack of flexibility and explosion in the line. Maybe you could see that a little bit more. I don't know. But we're in that time of year where this is when you put the hay in the barn kind of deal. This is when you get everything ready for the season. So this is an important time. Everybody knows that, but it just doesn't seem like it's taken this coaching staff very long to get in their rhythm, to get in their flow, to have this stuff going.
It feels like, he had 70 days to prepare for this, or, however long after he got fired from Carolina.
True.
He had quite a while to prepare and have a lot of conversations with Trev. So by the time he really took off, I mean, it was like he was already running, had good ideas on, and it wasn't like everything went perfect for him. You knew he thought he was probably getting Pete's at that time. Probably thought Mickey Joseph would be part of the staff. I mean, there are probably things he thought were going to be there that ended up not being there. So it's not like he's had every bit of fortune along the way either, but yet he's been able to pivot so quickly. And he's just, he kind of has a Rolodex of, I know which guys I want. I know how I want to build the roster up. He had a pretty good idea what the roster, I think, was looking like even as he came in here. He had some time to evaluate that and watch some games, come to Lincoln for a weekend, a home weekend with his family. I mean, all those things. I mean, he was about as prepared as a coach is ever going to be for taking over a change like that.
You wonder who he's really relying on as a gauge for the team, last year's team, as a I guess what I'm trying to say is the guys coming back. We still have Raiola as a coach, but that's really the only one. So, like, I wonder if he's giving him any guidance on what kind of players they are, or is it complete clean slate kind of deal? Like, we're not – last year doesn't matter one little bit. We don't know what you were being asked to do. We don't know, enough about that situation to judge you on it. But I'll just be really curious if there's guys that played a significant amount last year for us, if we find their roles diminishing, and to see if other guys emerge, like just throwing a name out, like a Nopola Gates. I'm not saying you just haven't heard of that guy for the longest.
Or position changes with guys or new positions. I mean, the fullback, as an example, is a position that didn't exist a year ago, and now it's a spot that somebody could find their way into. There was an interesting article this weekend I read, and it was in the World Herald and the Journal Star and everything. I guess those are all merged together now, but it was about in-state recruiting. And it's a question, and I found so many prior segments that we've done on this topic, and I posted them on Sunday. And it was about, is there more talent in Nebraska? And they even talked with Steve Warren in at Warren Academy, and I'm like, we had Warren on last summer, and we brought this question up. Talked to Glenn Snodgrass, head football coach at York, whose son, Garrett's on the team. And could be one of those guys that I could see Garrett, if he doesn't turn out to be a linebacker this year. I've kind of said it before, I have no idea if they're even projecting him here, but I could see him fall into a fullback type of role or doing something like that. Who knows?
He's a good size for a fullback, really.
Could be. But what's interesting to me is I don't see it as being that there's just more talent now. And I've never seen it that way. From year to year, it fluctuates. But the last couple of seasons, we've had these bigger numbers. But the reality is that what is in that article is that these kids are getting more opportunities now with Huddle and to get their names out there. I mean, that Carter Nelson from Ainsworth is a big time recruit right now, and he's playing 8-man ball up in Ainsworth. That doesn't exist 15 and 10 years ago, even though there might have been players of somewhat similar, ability. I'm not saying I'm not saying that he's not an elite athlete, and I'm not saying that there's never been athletes before that have played, that could have played that well either, But your ability to get out and be noticed, to go and be a part of camps, to be a part of development groups like what the Warren Academy does, that makes a difference now. And now that the cat's out of the bag or whatever, coaches from out of state have come here enough times now, and they've built up relationships. They're not just going to start leaving. The talent's here, so I don't see it going anywhere. And this is a good thing for Nebraska. I'll argue it's a good thing, even though we're going to have more competition with other teams coming in here, do your job. And I know Coach Rule's going to do that. I know he is. Do your job, and we should get the guys that we want.
Oh, 100%. And you're right. I think it fluctuates from year to year. I do feel like there's lately been a kind of an increase in terms of like D1 talent. But again, you bring up a good point with Huddle and all the camps you can do. There's just a lot of opportunity to get out there and be evaluated. If falling through the cracks anymore almost has to be intentional. Like for you to fall through the cracks means you're almost intentionally skipping camps, intentionally skipping places to go get evaluated. It could be a money thing, but I don't know. I feel like that's hard to do. One thing I really like what Rule has talked about is, and I think this could separate Nebraska going forward, is to really watch and evaluate senior film on guys.
Mm-hmm.
Because the recruiting process starts up so early anymore. You're talking sophomores, and they almost are committed to their school by their junior year. And then by the time, so all these schools fill up with sophomores and junior commits. And then if a guy pops off his senior year, he's the fall through the crack guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's the guy that ends up going to, Northern Illinois or something and ends up being an All-American. And I always thought that was something Nebraska was really good at, was getting those guys that have potential. They're going to grow. They just haven't hit it yet. A lot of us hit our growth spurts at different times. And it's just if you're a D1 athlete, it's just really unfortunate if you don't hit it until your senior year, the way things are going nowadays. But if you're really good at evaluating and you trust your staff to do that, that's a niche we could slip into there while still recruiting at a high level otherwise. And obviously the main thing is developing these guys into a system an identity that we've all agreed on. And I feel like that's one of probably Rule's strengths. If we can start doing that, that's how we challenge teams that will never out-recruit. We're never going to out-recruit Ohio State, even in our own conference. We'll never out-recruit Ohio State or Michigan. Penn State will probably be close, but what we could do is get really good at developing those guys that everybody's kind of late on because they filled their classes up with 4 stars and 5 stars. And by the time they're contributing to the team, not only are they physically ready to do it, but they've been in the system so long that they're mentally capable and ready to go. I think, if I project what Nebraska football will look like in the next 5 years, and if I'm being as optimistic as I can, that's kind of how I think it's going to end up going. You will get some high-level recruits for sure, and we'll get some transfer portal guys for sure, but it'll be that late kind of signee at the end of the year, had a good senior year, and those guys pop off. I think those guys will be the ones that were like, that's the separator for Nebraska. We're like a Jared Tomich, somebody like that kind of took a little while to get up there, but that's how it used to be. You didn't really even contribute to your junior or senior year back in the day, and nowadays it's like if you're not on the field by the time you're a sophomore, you're almost bust. Like they're talking about Fedoni, like it's a make or break year for him. That's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, he's been there 2 years and been injured,
right.
Both of them. That's the thing with the recruiting. It's changing so much that I don't even know what it means to say that we can or can't recruit like in Ohio State, because recruiting numbers are different now. If we go out and get 15 or 20 guys tops in a class, because you're going to fill another 10 spots with transfer portal guys, if that's what you're doing. Now, I don't know. I think at some point that's going to normalize itself a little bit. We had a really big transfer portal year a year ago when it was kind of a make or break year for Frost. And then this year, when you're having a transition year, some of that makes sense. But ideally, I guess I haven't dug deep into looking at Alabama's numbers or Georgia's numbers. How big are they in the transfer portal? Are they going out and getting 10 guys a year, or are they cherry picking just 2 or 3? And if you're really doing well, how big of the portal is what you do from an incoming? If you're doing well, you're going to lose some kids because see what we've done with Georgia. We've taken 3 of their guys.
Right.
You're not playing at those schools. So,
and not 3 3-star development players. We're taking high level guys that they recruited that just for whatever reason haven't made it to the field in a significant time. So you're right. I don't know. The sport needs to chill out for a little while. There's been so much change, NIL, the transfer portal, conference realignments and all that stuff, playoff expansion. It's like, what is normal? I don't even know. Every year, Bill Bush was talking about how, I think it was on Sip and Jake, but, it used to be, there was about maybe, I don't know if he said 2 or 5% change every year in college football. It was just this much change. Maybe it was a kickoff rule, or maybe, whatever, just a couple rule changes and this and that. And now, like these last couple years, it's been like 80% change. There's been so much. So it's hard to know what's normal. It's hard to know how you're going to recruit going forward because, at some point there's going to be some kind of, there's going to be some kind of I would imagine some kind of restriction on the transfer portal. There's got to be some kind of normalization of the NIL, or if the schools are going to take it in-house. You just don't know yet. So it's still wild, wild west. And I think for what we're doing right now, I'm glad we got a guy like Rule in here who seems to be mobile. He seems to be able to kind of to move and shake with this and try to make the best out of it. And that's kind of why I think he was an important hire for us versus like, I'm not trying to throw out because there's a lot of comparison with Deion Sanders and everything like that. But Deion's never built a program to this level. I know he went to Jackson State and did what he did there, and that was very impressive. I got nothing against Prime, but I just feel like I don't know that he knows enough to know what he doesn't know yet, and I think Rule kind of does. But what the hell do I know? Yeah, I could definitely be wrong, but it just seems like I see Deion on TV a lot. I see Deion with his tweets a lot. I don't necessarily see him in pictures in living rooms with him a lot. And I'm not searching any of that stuff. I'm not searching Deion at all, but it comes up on my feed. And when I see him, it's like interview with Rich Eisen or something like that, or on ESPN. And that makes sense. He's a celebrity, use a celebrity recruit, but Nick Saban's a celebrity. Nick Saban's a great recruiter, but he's still out there grinding. There's a lot of celebrities in the big boy college football. Deion's not the only one. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes people act like he's the only like superstar coach out there. I'm like, well, he isn't. He's not even close. So
and when you take on a program like Nebraska, you take on everything that comes with it.
Sure.
And that is, in the case of Coach Rule, last week, that means on Thursday night, he and Trev are in Phoenix at a big NIL event with the big booster.
Sure.
And he's traveled all across the state because that's important to the fans in the state is that you do make some FaceTime around there. He sent his coaches around the state. I'm interested to see what's going to happen at the coaches clinic here in the spring. And I've talked about the coaches clinic many, many, many times. Mm-hmm. Mac, you and I went to clinics from Solich all the way to the Frost era.
Yeah.
And we watched it progressively lose steam. It lost numbers. Less and less of the high school and the regional coaches were coming to it as we went from coaching staff to coaching staff. And I'm not even pointing a finger at any one person said it's your fault or your fault. It has nothing to do with that. It's just there was a lot of changes. And when we first started going there, which again was the last year of Solich, it was when they brought Pelini as the defensive coordinator. That was still kind of old school. There were coaches that had been around for quite a while. And the high school coaches knew the college coaches. It was kind of the old shake a hand and
it really was.
Keep an eye on this freshman kid that we have, and he might be good in a couple of years, that kind of thing. And then it just falls off with relationships falling off as we went through all these staffs.
Yep.
And look, I'm not naive to think that the relationships all of a sudden are built just because Ed Foley has driven around, but he's made some great inroads, and the staff is making great inroads, and they're making the effort that I think everyone here can appreciate. And what I would like to see on the vice versa end of this, I would love to see those high school coaches and the regional coaches make that same effort, show that same, respect back. And I'd love to see a gigantic coaches clinic.
That'd be good.
I think it's important. Those relationships go both ways. I'd just love to see it. I'd love to see a record crowd, and really to show that it's appreciated by the staffs all around here that, you guys have come out to see us. We're coming out here to support and see you.
Well, and they should do that. And I think they probably will. I don't think there's any when you get the new staff in, the hard feelings kind of go away a little bit, because it's a new AD, it's a new staff. If you're pissed off at Frost for not coming to your campus, well, he's gone. So if you're seeing the guys now really reaching out on a high level, and trying to get back to you, trying to, have open communication lines and really making the state a focus of the state's program.
Yeah.
I think the high school coaches will respond really well to that. And so, I mean, Susan Nels's job. Mm-hmm. Is she the liaison? Is she going to be the liaison?
She's the chief of staff.
Okay.
And so and you know, it's been written quite a bit about how right now the staff at Nebraska, since Rule got hired, we have the largest staff, or tied for the second largest, I think, with Michigan at like 39 people.
Nice.
And so we've had like chief of staffs or director of football opposite in the past. I think we have a few more now because Coach Rule has a director of player personnel and kind of an operations guy, but then Susan Elsa with chief of staff is kind of a different role. And so actually we've been a little bit of talks with Susan and a couple other people. I'd love to have a couple of them onto the Redcast, and it would be great to kind of get some information, a little more info on what is their role specifically, or where are the areas that they're focusing on. But I mean, what I love about what she brings, same thing that Bob Wager as the tight ends coach, who comes from Arlington High School in Arlington, Martin, I think, where we got 2 players from this recruiting class, and also where he was a longtime coach.
Right.
Same thing that Joey McGuire was when he brought him out of high school coaching up to Baylor, and now he's the head coach of Texas Tech. Now we have his son Garrett coaching wide receivers. And there are different ways, like if you want to rule Texas, and I don't mean rule, but if you want to get into a certain area, whatever it is, the last staff, it was Georgia and Florida because we had all these Southeast connections, right? Well, the same thing could have been said. Let's go down to Texas. Let's get a couple of assistant coaches from some school, blah, blah, blah. They've taken a different approach. I mean, to go and get a high school coach and pull him out, Garrett, obviously recently playing there in Baylor, and then Susan Elsa, and I'm going to screw up the group. It was like, the Inter Texas League of Football or whatever, but she was like the CEO of this group of like all that has connections to all the schools, to all the head coaches.
It sounded like a massive job.
A completely different approach than just saying, let's just go get, kind of a hotshot assistant coach down there at Texas Tech or at TCU or something that, that is going to get us Texas. This is we actually kind of we penetrated inside the high school ranks of Texas to go and get people kind of out of it that really have a lot of connections, and we'll see what happens with it. There were some very immediate wins. The one kid who was the Iowa legacy that picked us, and of course I'm already blanking on the name, but to go down there right away, show a little bit of success, but now it's about building the relationships and seeing what happens, in year 2 and year 3 down there. I think, we go back to the recruiting classes that we said that they might be smaller in the future because you're making room in different ways with transfers and all that. Let's say a normal class is 20 guys, 22, I don't know. Well, this last year, Nebraska got 8 kids from the state of Nebraska. And that's including that we didn't get 2 kids that went to Iowa State. One of them was Bramer, the longtime tight end recruit. Oh, yeah. We didn't even offer until Coach Rule got here Flores, the quarterback at Gretna, who goes to Oklahoma State. And then you had McIntyre from Fremont Bergen going to Oklahoma. So that's that's not like 4 more guys that kind of went to just, FCS schools. Right. That's 4 more Power 5 guys on top of the 8 that we got. That's 12 in state. And I don't necessarily see that slow down. So if Nebraska can do the best that it can do in state, if we can get 8, I mean, geez, this seems like a crazy thing to say, but like if we can get 8 or 9 guys a year from in state,
that does sound like a crazy high number though. But
I think we already have 7 offered already to next year.
I know, and that's why to me I feel like we're currently on just a little bit of an uptick on talent, and that kind of makes sense because the 90s players that were really good for us are now old enough that their kids are coming of age. I mean, that's really how I think of it. I'm like, all their kids that are still around here are starting to become available. And it's,
ESPN, they had that one show, Around the Horn or whatever, and they have somebody that corrects the wrongs that the guys say during it. So I want to thank a couple of our people here. Philly Knack saying it's Ismael Smith Flores. And yes, I knew it was like a dash name. So that was the recruit, the legacy from Iowa. And then Jason Stinger, I think it's called the Unified Interscholastic League, the UIL, and that's
Jason
correct.
Coming out hot, nice,
and that's awesome. I mean, first off, that's awesome. Thank you for watching.
Oh, he could have just made that up, and we're just repeating it. Either way, I don't care.
That sounds right.
That sounds right to me.
That does sound
right.
We're
going with it,
and we appreciate.
Tweet it, send it.
And then also, here's a question from Brian: what do you think of the new wide receiver coach? I mean, obviously, a lot of the initial focus. He's young, He's a young guy, but
he is young.
He's young. and he got to speak for the first time.
He's not one of those guys that you'd be surprised to find out how young he is.
Yeah.
Would you believe me if I told you that kid was only 22? Yeah.
I
would believe you if you told me that kid was 16. I would. That's not to degrade any of his coaching ability. But we can't just cruise on by the fact that this young man is young. He said honey buns and Pop-Tarts. He said, come to my office and get honey buns and Pop-Tarts. And it's adorable. It's but listen, we have no room to talk about who the coach is hired right now.
Yeah.
We've been terrible. I hope he does just fine. I'm rooting for him. I don't care. I really don't care that he's young, but I'm not going to be one of those guys. Well, he ain't that young. No, he's young. He's young.
What did Coach Rule say on Bussin' with the Boys when he was like, he's like, people gave him some crap about, who
and part of me is like, you guys hired me here because you're losing. What do you care what I'm hiring? I'm like, yeah, I agree. And that part is true, but
it is.
But when I heard him talk, I thought, okay, maybe he's going to sound kind of old, and he's young. He's young. He's really young. Don't know what to think about him yet. I don't know what to think about him as a recruiter. I don't know if you give him credit yet for, like, if we get – is Xavier Betts, is there some limbo with him now? I heard he didn't report, but I don't know if that was an old report or not.
I haven't heard anything yet. I mean, one way or the other. So,
well, our wide receiver room is humongous, and we'll see how he does with it. They were very good last year. The wide receivers were very good last year, so he's got a big job. He really does. I mean, they could maintain, not get any better, and I would be pleased with the wide receiver play this year if it was similar to last year.
I think one part of this is making sure that we're putting the right amount of, or that Coach Rule is putting the right amount of responsibilities on the coaches, right?
Right.
So, to your point, Garrett McGuire is young.
Yep.
And if he's asked to call plays and match wits with the defensive coordinators of the Big Ten, I would say that we probably have made
asking a lot.
We've made an error, right? But we're not asking that either.
No,
and
that's true.
What he did with his staff, which I think was really good, is he's a manager of coaches, so he's coaching his coaches, and then he brings in two coordinators. One of them, Satterfield, that's been with him since the early 2000s.
Right.
So I mean, he speaks like it's like Coach Rule up there talking when Satterfield's talking, and you can tell that he played a role in hiring some of the other offensive coaches too. Right. And I think he's going to help coach the coaches. Yeah. And I do think that it's the proper responsibilities on the proper people. The defensive side, it's a little different. Coach White, the new defense coordinator from Syracuse, didn't have a chance to hire any of those defensive coaches, but he did bring in part of the staff that we have, this large staff. He's brought in like 3 different guys that are everything from grad assistants to defensive analysts that have come with him from Syracuse.
Okay.
And so I think my guess is some of the money saved, because we know that they were, they had a $7 million budget for the coaching staff, and it's turned out to be, I think, about 5.5.
It's
roughly.
Really close to what we paid last year's staff.
Yes. And so if they came in $1.5 million, but then they turn around and they hire an extra 10 or so people that are doing everything from chief of staff work to, you name it, the different analysts and all that. Then,
but does that come out of that pool?
Well, it may not directly, but point is,
I mean, I don't.
We have a bigger staff over here, and
to me, it's like, all right, we got some of these guys bare minimum, and we should have. I mean, like, you wouldn't. Garrett McGuire might be a future star, but he hasn't done enough to earn a salary over what he's earning, and that's fine. But if he has a really good year next year, some of these coaches say Raiola has a really good year next year, it still gives us room within that $7 million pool to give these guys raises to keep them. If we maxed everybody's salary out this year, I mean, like, what are you going to do from there? I suppose it goes up. I don't know. Maybe the Trev gives you a little bit more each year, but it makes sense to leave a bit in the bank and to let these guys grow, and then you won't have any big payouts either if you have to.
And that loose. It goes back to that initial point we talked about with. If Pete's had been a part of this staff, had Mickey Joseph been a part of the staff, when that number was floated around at $7 million, there are reasons why you could have seen how that could have come around.
And that would have been justified too.
Justified with those guys.
A little more experience. I don't have any problem with it. I just don't care that much about coaches' salaries, especially this time of year. But once we start losing, I'll get pissed. If we start losing, I'm like, well, this guy ain't worth. It was like when what was old 450? What was that guy's special teams coordinator?
Bruce Reed.
450. That seemed like a lot. For him. I was just like, wow.
But, you know,
You're living well.
what's funny is that, you know, Ed Foley, he's somewhere just in that range as the special teams guy. But already within just the couple of months that he's been here, the times, the amount of name recognition that he has built up going all over the place. I mean, like, by the way, also, I loved when his press conference where he talked about, you know, right away at the first signing period, I pretty much, you know, had what I needed. I got my transfer deep snapper. You know, we got our kicker, Tristan Alvano from Omaha. I was good with recruiting. So I kind of, for the next month and a half, I didn't really have a lot that I had to do there. So to me, no one needed to tell me. I just got in the car and I just started driving.
Nice.
And I'm sure it was a little more strategic than that. I'm sure, you know, he had some conversations with Coach Rule about that. I'm sure Coach Rule, for the months, you know, the month or so leading up to taking the job, and the conversations he had with Trev was, this is how important it is. We need to get out here and we need to make some inroads back in this state.
Right.
And so,
I'm sure Trev relayed that pretty hardcore.
I think one of the things that Trev maybe, you know, laid, you know, pretty hardcore was that we need to get physical. We need to we need to win the trenches. We need to win on the lines of scrimmage. And it starts with recruiting. Everything always does. You got to build your numbers up on the O-line, on the D-line. That's important. But man, if I was at that coach's clinic, and I know for sure I want to talk with one of the coaches that's going to be at, I know for sure I'm going to have one guy on. I want to know what practice is like. I don't care what the play is. I don't want to know that we necessarily line up in this formation or that formation, whatever. I mean, the X's and O's, I can study past years of Satterfield, of Rule and all that. And we'll watch the spring game and see a few things. But I want to know if you're going to get better at tackling, then you got to tackle. You just got to tackle, right? I mean, this isn't.
If you're going to be more physical, you're going to have to start being physical.
Got to be more physical. If you're going to,
it won't just appear on Saturday.
If you're going to have a quarterback competition, I blew in the face on the green jersey stuff. If you're going to have a quarterback competition, then you got to compete. You got to play football and compete. And
I'm fully, by the way, moved to that side of things. To me, we're well beyond protecting players. And, you know, I mean, to an extent, I'm not trying to get anybody hurt, but it's like, okay, we're playing football, so let's do football things for practice. And some of that's going to require our quarterbacks getting hit. Actually, a lot of that's going to, depending, I assume we're going to have a fairly strong quarterback running element to this offense.
I think so.
So let's see how, you know, thudding up won't tell us if he's going to fumble when he goes into contact. You know, some guys aren't good at that. You know, I always think of like Taylor Martinez. Super fast, not particularly elusive, terrible going into contact. Remember how he just jump or it just always looked. I've never seen anyone get more awkwardly tackled than Taylor Martinez consistently. Adrian, better at going into contact, except a little loose with the ball. It was just like, all right, well, these are things we need to know. And I don't think come season time, that's when we need to find out. You need to find out in practice. I know we reference this one all the time, but with Zach Taylor, we found out in that spring game or that spring practice, that dude can take a beating and he'll stand up and he'll still deliver the ball in the pocket and move the ball down the field.
I think this is a reason, and for the listeners, if you haven't heard us say this one before, but I think it's a reason that we feel the way and as passionate as we are about this.
Yes.
It's probably because we were one of about 250, 300 people in the stadium back in 2005 at what I consider the height of the probably the best day of the Callahan era.
Oh.
We watched a 2-hour, 200-play scrimmage with no green jerseys on, and Zach Taylor,
like field level too.
Oh my! Well, there was no. I mean, yeah, it was a smaller clinic because that was happening at that time, and we walk into that scrimmage, and Joe Daly is the starter, and 200 plays later, Zach Taylor is the starter.
Yeah.
And Zach Taylor took hits from Adam Carricker and Jay Moore and McKeven Smith and Tyus Adams and Stuart Bradley took hits. Real football hits.
He was beat down that day.
But
they beat him up.
But what they learned about Zach Taylor in the process was that every time he got beat down on a play, he would get back up, he would call a play in the huddle. And you know, that's saying something back in the West Coast era of the plays were 52 words long. He had to, he spit out the whole play and everyone got lined up and he'd complete a 10-yard out the next play, and it looked like real football. There were refs on the field, and he was moving the ball better than we had seen the entire prior year with Daly. And you will never learn that about a guy if you don't do that. Because by the time we got to the spring game, they didn't do that with Zach at that point. And so that one scrimmage, I mean, I give all the credit to Callahan. I mean, that was a tough move for him to probably do. He risked his quarterbacks, but I think he felt that that's what he had to do.
When we watched the one, because I remember being at the coach's clinic for Taylor Martinez too, and there was a scrimmage they were doing, and you and I both mentioned, like, man, this dude is fast. But like, he'll take off, and he's just 10 yards down the field before anyone even realizes it. But did they have jerseys on? Did they have green jerseys on for that? I can't remember.
I want to say they did. I don't remember him.
Yeah, he must have. Maybe it was Thud, because was it like Zach Lee at the time and then him?
Yeah. Talking about Thud, what's the famous one? Who's the running back? Kenny Wilson.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that there was all this, you want to hear about people, drinking Kool-Aid or whatever, but the reports that came out of this was like in 2005 or whatever, this unbelievable run that, Kenny Wilson broke like 10 tackles and did all this stuff. And we finally got to see the replay or some video of it. And it was no pads.
Yeah, they were in shells. It was just half pads. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I don't even know if the guys gave up that were trying to tackle him because it was Thud. I'm like, it was kind of a cool run. Yeah, but to hear it described versus seeing it was a big disappointment.
I think that was something that changed your and my opinion too at times, is that we would go to these. Yeah. We've been to countless practices going to those clinics, and so we'd be at the same practice that maybe a sports writer might be at or whatever. And sometimes which reporters that they say it the same way we saw it, and then there's other ones that will embellish something
quite a bit
a certain way, and you're like, no, that's not what I saw.
Yeah, at all. It's like, what did maybe I missed that. And like, I talked to you, I'm like, no, I didn't see that. I'm like, okay. So, all right, well, and it's whatever. I get it. If you got to produce content, you got to produce content. And we weren't doing podcasts at the time or anything like that, but I found it irritating because I'm like, this is the kind of shit that gets me excited for stuff I shouldn't be excited about because you're misleading me,
Well, we've been wrong 1,000 times on this show.
Kenny Wilson broke his leg on a TV.
We've been wrong 1,000 times on this show over the course of the year.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Mostly wrong.
Yeah, mostly wrong, right? And very rarely am I so confident in what I'm saying, like, bet on this is going to happen. I can remember walking out of that scrimmage, though, and calling my uncle afterwards and saying, that Zach Taylor guy, you may not know who he is because Harrison Beck's going to be the starter next year. Everyone knew
the throw god.
Harrison Beck was going to be it. But I was like, this Zach Taylor guy's starting. Yeah. I mean, like, you just knew it. It was instantly after that one scrimmage. And so I don't know that we have a Zach Taylor kind of moment coming up here. I don't know. But what I am interested in, what I do want
too about Casey being hurt is we definitely won't have that for the spring. And that's a bummer too.
Well, not with him, but we've got 6 scholarship guys at quarterback.
Yeah.
5 other, Casey's going to be out with the injury. But the other 5, man, I want to see them all get a chance. If nothing else, to me personally, I almost feel like it's a disservice to, like, I really love what Logan Smothers has done here. I'm singling him out. I think he's been tough nosed. He's could have quit, all those things.
I don't mind Logan.
And I would love to just see him have a shot to go and play football.
I was just going to ask you, who do you think? Because Sims is going to get, if Sims is healthy, and I think he's supposed to be.
Sure.
I foresee him getting the lion's share of the snaps with the ones to begin with. Maybe I'm wrong, but the way they talk about him and what he was recruited to do, I feel like he'll get the ones. Who do you think gets the second? Who do you think is number 2 with the quarterbacks this spring? Do you think it'll be Logan, or do you?
If all things are even with health, I would think it would be Logan.
Any chance, like,
now
Harbor gets, starts to develop and become something different? He's a big physical kid with a strong arm.
He's a big mobile dude. He could be a kid that, I think it was Whipple wanted him to play tight end, and
that's a bad sign for a quarterback. When does that ever work?
It's kind of like when Dan Kendra at Florida State got moved to fullback. Right?
Well, who was the Texas quarterback we both recruited? And then went down to I don't even know where he ended up going, but
no, I know
he was a tight end. He was like some Swedish kid that was going to be like, nobody recruited him at quarterback except us. Everybody else wanted him as a tight end.
Yeah. And
then there was that cat from Lincoln Christian that was supposed to be a quarterback and then went down to Arizona State and became a tight end.
Bubak or something.
Bubak, yeah, that's right.
The one that I'm interested in is Torres. I mean,
Torres
just because we've heard a lot about him, and I've went back and watched more of his film, and he is mobile. He can move around. We sometimes, and I'm guilty of this. We we use the word mobile, and sometimes that means we're going to run the ball with that quarterback. And I don't necessarily mean that either. Casey's a mobile quarterback and should have been used a lot more, or his mobility should have been used a lot more last year.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he should have ran the ball a lot more.
Right.
It just means that we should have rolled the pocket more,
sure.
got him out, not just sat flat-footed in a pocket.
Yeah.
And that was our argument 2 years ago all the time with Adrian, was we love the runner that Adrian is. Stop running him 25 times a game. We wanted a running back to be the leading runner. I want to see an offense that has some two-back at times, nice. On the field, in addition to that quarterback, and where they all still can have the ability on a play to run the ball. I mean, that gives the defense a lot to look at. Here's a question, Philly Knack. Should we expect to go through growing pains this season with all the new coaches and new systems on both sides of the ball?
I would. I mean, but I would say they could be mitigated a fair amount by just the effort this team. The coaches have said a lot of good things with how hard this team works, and that's something that's carried over. Even Bill Bush was big on how hard this team worked. Mickey Joseph said the same thing. But I just don't see any way of not going through some growing pains. But I just don't know what to expect anymore from this team. Like I feel like there's a potential if they're playing well and as a cohesive unit that we're pretty good. Like we come out of the gate and win some games that maybe people weren't predicting. That Minnesota game is going to tell us a lot.
Yeah, that's huge.
But do I expect it? Yeah, I won't be surprised by growing pains at all. I'd be more surprised if we didn't have any. But maybe that's just me being a doubter on this staff. But that's just, I mean, I don't know how I could be more optimistic without sounding ridiculous.
Well, Coach Rule said that, he on the Bussin' with the Boys, he talked about not being a slow burn or as slow of a burn. Now, let's put that in perspective. He was referencing what happened at Temple, what happened at Baylor. Totally different situations, scenarios than what he's taking over here. He didn't have – I mean, at Baylor, he had a roster of 45 when he took over. Yeah. Right now, we have a roster of 130 or whatever it is right now. Significantly different situation. I think he's ecstatic with the situation that he stepped into, to be quite honest with you, from a numbers and support standpoint.
Yep.
But with all that said, I mean, there's a lot of things that, a slow burn, or saying that I don't think it will be a slow burn, still could be getting to 6 wins and getting to going to a bowl game in year one. I like to reference Nick Saban took over a mess at Alabama, and he was 6-6 at the end of his first year, won the bowl game, and they went 7-6. Bob Stoops took over a mess at Oklahoma, and in that first year, they went 7-5. And by the way, those records in both cases at Alabama then and at Oklahoma were, I'm sure people weren't doing handstands and cartwheels, but it was met with a positive, that was progress as based off of what was going on prior at those schools. And I would say right now, if we went 6-6 next year, and this is just the way I fan, so don't beat me up too much here. I'm not going to be doing cartwheels if we go 6-6 next year. I will be ecstatic that we're in a bowl game again and that we ended that horrible, bowlless streak.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but I'm sorry. I mean, I guess my
6 is such a low number.
I'm just not.
It just is.
It's not going to excite me. But I also am going to understand that it means progress
for sure.
It's a means to get to the next step.
Right.
My entire offseason, I'm saying is the race to 6, and the race to 6 means how quick can you get to 6 games and 6 wins? Can we get there in week 6 or 7 or 8? How amazing would that be? Or the worst case scenario is we're hosting Iowa in week 12 and we're 5-6, and you know what? Get to 6.
Get to 6.
One way or the other. Get to 6.
No matter what, get to 6.
I think it's really important to get to 6.
But I'm with you. If we get to 6, it's hard to imagine being super thrilled about 6 wins. Maybe you could be, and I know how ridiculous that sounds based off of how our most recent success, which has been none. But I don't think we had. I thought we had a bowl game team or a team talented enough to go to a bowl the last a couple years, really. For sure.
Every year we've had a team talented enough
You're
to go to a bowl.
Right.
There's a single.
So
we haven't had a team that wasn't talented enough any of the years.
So yeah, I mean, looking back at that growing pains, I'm like, I don't even know how that looked different. I'm like, what? For us, the whole career was growing pains.
I don't
like we were like, when was it right? It was all like seemingly hard to figure out.
Were we worse a year ago than we were at the end of the Callahan era? where we went 5-6. Last year we go 4-8. That Callahan era, we could have lost more games. That last season we should have lost to Ball State, and that would have guy dropped a touchdown pass that would have. So we really could have been 4-7 or 4-8. I guess that last year of Callahan, we could have been just the same. And so the point is, what Bo Pelini stepped into taking over, how different is that versus what Coach Rule is taking over? I'm just curious there. And I think the athletic director actually can help play a big role in the transition, especially if the athletic director has a good understanding of the situation and has ability to help. In 2008, Coach Osborne was in a position where he was helping his young head coach out when he was like, I think you should probably keep around a couple of these offensive coaches. Sean Watson, keep around your recruiting coordinator, Ted Gilmore, keep those guys around, because if you focus on the defense, I think that's going to be your quickest way to kind of start getting some wins and let the offense kind of keep building. Right now, I think Trev, without getting into X's and O's, I don't think Trev is telling him, hey, you need to run this set or that set. But I think Trev has definitely been playing a big role in the background of doing the right things, whether it is going out to the coaches and seeing the in-state guys or we need to make sure that there's a kid up there in Gretna that we haven't, said hi to yet.
Right.
And however that gets going, however those conversations and everything get going, sending a coach to go and see Sam Foltz's parents.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little thing, right? It's a little gesture to take it back to the very beginning. That's a little gesture that it would have been real easy not to do it. But somebody's telling him that. That's not Coach Rule just knowing that every
he
history.
Couldn't know that.
Yeah, there's certain things he just can't know the history of every little thing like that. And whether it was Trev or who told him to do that, it's that there's people getting in these guys' ears about what's important in Nebraska football.
And they're doing it.
And they're doing it.
And they're and I don't feel like they're going out of their way either to publicize it, which I kind of like too. They're just going and you're hearing about it.
Yeah.
But going back to that growing pains question, I mean, we're probably going to have a new offense. We're going to have a new offense. We're definitely going to have a new defense. What do you think will come online faster? Because if it's Casey's the starter, I really actually trust Casey a lot to be on his P's and Q's and have an offense down pretty quick. And our offensive line, I feel like, has had to adapt so much that I don't know that. I'm a little worried about the defense coming online quick, because I feel like there's going to be some position shuffling there a little bit to get guys in the right spot and to see how this kind of, if we're going to do the 3-3-5, and I'm not trying to get hung up on the formation or anything, but it just seems like that might be difficult to parse out who's best suited for what position and how to get rolling on that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think from a pure talent standpoint, what we have coming back on offense at all these different skill positions. I mean, you've got 2 P5 starting quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Thompson at Texas prior to last season. Then you have Sims coming from Georgia Tech. To even have Logan Smothers, who has started, against Iowa a year ago. I mean, and Purdy has started a game at Florida State, for Christ's sakes. I mean, just that position. But then you have the running back position where nobody's left. And we were concerned a couple months ago that all of them would leave. Yeah. AJ Allen is gone and we're going to lose Grant and all that. No, none of them. They've all come back at least for spring, and we'll see what happens through spring. This is the toughest time of year, and they've got to make it through it. But we'll see who makes it through it, right? The wide receiving core, the talent that is in that room right now, the depth that's in that room,
the depth,
the tight end spot.
Yeah.
If we can get a healthy Fedoni to go along with obviously Gilbert coming in from Georgia, and still having Chris Hickman and having some of the young guys, Carney and stuff. I mean, that's a good room there. Then it falls onto the O line. Yeah. And I thought the way that the O line was playing by the end of last year, against Iowa, they played their best game, and they didn't have Ben Scott, who is most likely going to be the starting center. Right. They didn't have Nuuli, who's probably going to be one of the starting guards. They didn't have Prohaska, who, if he can be healthy, is probably going to be a starting tackle. Yep. And so, there's some depth there. We have the coach of that group back for another season. Definitely the style of coaching that he coaches on the O-line, something that Frost talked about all last season, was he liked the style that Raiola brought in. But then we pretty much never probably got to see that as we saw Whipple's offense for the whole year. Then you get Rule coming in here, and his explanation for why he kept Raiola was he coaches the kind of blocking that I want to see our team do. So I just think you're going to see things on that side of the ball marry well.
Right.
And I think that we're going to see an offense that can be explosive, that can run the ball when it needs to run the ball, that can play in the climactic conditions and do all that well. And that I think offensively we're going to see a very good unit. I think it's going to be a real good unit this year.
I think that's a great point, because there does seem to be a real unified message on the offensive side of the ball with the staff. That the language is similar. They're all of a very similar mindset on what we're going to do. That's probably going to make it a lot easier to convey that. And I think that was one of the problems of last year, was it was so disjointed. Like, your offensive lineman clearly had issues with the play caller.
Yeah.
Or not the offensive lineman, but the offensive line coach had problems with the play calling. And like that's a big issue. I remember Tenniper talking about how that was a problem when Tom first left it.
Mm-hmm.
We're game planning things that we can't block, and you should know better, but you don't, and it's becoming a problem. Well, I don't think that will be a problem. I hope that's not a problem, but I feel like that's something that's going to be addressed right away. I mean, that is probably why they kept Raiola, Satterfield, Ruler on the same page. They're going to communicate with each other what they want to do. That's going to help the O-line be better. Just being better with that level there. Who knows how much that will result in better play. Just more confidence in what I'm doing and where I'm going and where my help is. And who knows what that could translate to. So I'm kind of with you. And I'm not totally scared on what the defense is going to do, but if you look at our roster, you look at the experience, you look at the returning production, it's pretty encouraging. It's not a huge stretch to think that offense could come back and do just as well as they did last year, if not better, hopefully better in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Jason Singer says, I think the defense will have hiccups, but the talent is there on both sides. If everyone in offense studies like Casey, the offense will be firing right out of the gate.
I agree with that.
I certainly agree with that. And I do, if I'm answering the question, offense versus defense, I would say that the offense, I could see it having more success early. We'll see with the defense. And I think there's some parts that they can work with on the defense. I think you're going to need to see a couple transfers step into some roles too, or at least some guys that haven't had a lot of the play time yet. So somewhere between, on the edge between Jabari Butler, Blaze Gunnerson, Chief Borders, now the Georgia transfer, and of course I'm forgetting his name now too. But anyways, between all those guys, I mean, those are guys that haven't played here a lot of snaps yet. And I like Judy, the transfer from Texas A&M on the D-line. But again, it's just we're mentioning one more guy that hasn't played her yet. But the difference, I will say, from a year ago to now, we're not talking about guys, at least yet. And I'll call this out if we run into this over the summer. We're not talking about guys that we're going to be depending on that aren't here yet.
Right.
So last year, when we were waiting on O'Shawn to get here in July, MJ Sherman, Jason, thank you. But we were waiting on
Jason's on the ball.
Well, we were waiting on O'Shawn, until June and July. That Devin Drew didn't get here until August on the D line and transferred from Texas Tech. And the defensive tackle from Alabama last year,
Wynn.
Stephen Wynn. He didn't get here till the summer, and all those guys, we were counting on those guys right away. So at the very least,
always scary.
It is a step up that when we talk about that roster of 100 plus guys, those guys, they're pretty much here.
Yeah.
And so, and the one other area, the special teams, I mean, I'm really pleased right now with where we're at there. Bushimi, I love the guy as a punter. I mean, that's the best. This is the best I have felt at punter since we had Fultz.
Sure.
And at kicker, to have the returning kicker, but then also to have Alvano coming in here as well.
That's going to be a competition.
They've got the deep snapper coming in from Florida. So there's just, and the guy I'm really interested in there too is Kemp, the transfer from Virginia, the receiver, as a punt returner. As a punt returner. If we start to get any kind of returns going, kickoff or punt return, if we can start to flip the fields, if special teams can help us out there, it just everything plays a role with the helping the offense out, helping the defense out. So
you hear the term complementary football a lot, and a lot of these things get said over and over again, but they're important. And the more you can do that, it just shows you're a better team. But to me, complementary football is just saying we're a really good team. Like, we understand how to help out the defense, and the special teams understands how to help. And I think good teams just do that. And that clearly wasn't something we have done the last few years. Like you could tell by that fundamental alone, we weren't a good team because you couldn't count on any momentum flowing from one group to the next. It just didn't seem to matter.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for that kind of stuff to go away. I'm really tired of that stuff.
Well, I think we're a complimentary podcast, Mac, because we weren't planning to do a show tonight. This is actually exactly what Matt's rule is all about. You're not going to get a lot of
content.
Well, we're not going to give you a lot of prep time. Sometimes it's like we've had 3 beers and it's like nope, we're just going live. But I think we complement each other here. We've gone for over an hour now. And
holy shit,
we had no idea what the heck we were going to be talking about.
It's not too bad. I really didn't. I was like, well, we'll figure it out. Yes, go ahead and talk. I mean, I did want to talk about football anyway. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to really touch on. Quarterback. I would like to see them drop some more videos just because I've just kind of been a little thirsty. Not that it's going to change my view or anything, but I just like to see. I'd like to see the running backs. I'd like to see how they're moving. I just want to see how they're looking. AJ Allen now with another year in the program. It's always the freshman to the sophomore that I'm the most curious about.
And if you see them going in the right direction or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see the great development that happens, or sometimes you see that Adrian Martinez came back his sophomore year and he had some of the thickness on him. I think you go way back in the day. I think like Amon Green lost some of that speed. And,
too much creatine. They said it was a new product back in the 90s.
Didn't know it as well then, but yeah, and that's one of the things I miss about the coaches clinics too. And I want to focus a lot on the focus a lot on the coaches clinic this year.
Yeah.
With a couple of contacts I have and stuff is I just want to know how they're doing things from a practice standpoint. Like how are they running stuff? I think that's a good insight into things. And then what I always loved about the clinics too is you got to see the players after this 8-week period,
right?
And who looks like they've put in the work and who looks like they've done what they need to do, whether that's gain weight or lose weight. I'll make one last comparison to the 2008 season. Pelini's first year is when you have a big transition and you have a new strength and conditioning staff and new coaches, new eyeballs on you. Sometimes you switch positions. I'm going to be talking with Cody Glenn next week. He was a high back here and ended up as a linebacker and went to the pros as a linebacker. You see some guys making position changes on the same line of scrimmage, and sometimes you switch sides of the ball even, right? But the other thing is the new strength and conditioning staffs can see things sometimes in a player that maybe they didn't before.
Right.
And I always like to reference that last game of 2007. We lose to Colorado on the road 60-something to 50-something. We don't win the game and we score 50 points. Okay. So what a lousy, terrible defense and what a bunch of bums on that side of the ball. They're all terrible. I don't know where those players are today. Well, one of them was Ndamukong Suh. And one of them was, Philip Dillard.
Right.
And these guys looked very different at the end of 2007. Yeah. They looked slower. They were bigger at what they were trying to do schematically with Dillard. Never made sense. They got him up to like 270 and played middle guard with him. But, just a new staff comes in and says, we need to change that up. I remember the strength coach at that time talking about Dobson. He talked about the defensive backs and said they're stiff in the hips. And he was saying that in January. And they spent all offseason working on the stiffness of the hips and getting them to spin around quicker and everything. And those are guys like the young Eric Higgs and Prince Makamaras. So what does it do different? Right. Not that the previous staff was doing it wrong. It's just what does this staff do different, and do we see some different outcomes? With some players.
That's what you hope for. It's funny to me that there's strength and conditioning at this point. It has to be such a science that everybody sort of shares. It's weird that one could come in and it does vary.
It's interesting how different some are. Some are they always said with Duvall, and this is. To any of the players I talked to postseason about Duvall, none of them said anything bad about him. They're like, he got us strong. There was no doubt about that. We were strong. We could move a mountain, right? But I always think back to a conversation I had with Rob Zaska last year, and it was especially on the line of scrimmage, low man wins. Yeah. Anyone that watches the Eagles this whole season and in the playoffs, they get down to the quarterback sneaks, and it was all about who could get the lowest, right? And some of that's going to be that's not about who's the strongest guy wins. No. It's the low guy and who can move people, who can get under
technique,
people.
it's fundamentals, it's
all
basics, it's what makes good teams good teams.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to be. Talent wise, if we're playing like a good team, we're going to be a good team. We have the talent to be a good team. Like if Kansas State plays to a certain level, they'll go a certain length. That's not the same for us. I feel like we really could exceed a lot of the expectations just by playing really, really good. They're just well, even. I'd settle for well. If we played well all year, I wonder what that would look like.
If we played
that's
well,
more than 6. I guarantee it's more than 6 wins.
If we play well and we don't shoot ourselves in the foot,
yeah,
and we're good at the basics,
yeah,
nothing
crazy.
Yeah, forget the little things, the basics.
Yeah.
We do the basics well, and that's the thing. That's what you can be doing right now in spring ball.
Yep.
That's what you can be doing this offseason already. You can be focusing on the basics, and the basics of football are the same from year to year. They were the same 30 years ago as they are today. Snap the ball to the quarterback. We had issues with that the last 4 years. Tackle the guy running the ball. We had issues with tackling. Line up right. Get the right alignment. Line up defensively correctly.
Right.
Limit your turnovers. I mean, these are not the
kick the ball in the right direction.
Yeah, kick the ball in the right direction when you're playing at Michigan State.
Right.
Make the field goals that are 35 yards like we missed against Oklahoma 2 years ago. All those things. And I mean, we could go through it, countless numbers of these issues. These were not little things. These are basics.
Yep.
Do the basics well. And if you do that, here's the thing, I'll promise you. If you do the basics well, if you're good at special teams on week 1, you're going to win more week 1s than you lose. And when you think back to the last 2 years where we've lost a game before September even turned on the calendar, it was usually things like onside kicks when you're up 11 or punts that you're catching, fielding in the end zone, throwing out of it for safety, or it was penalties that killed you at times like we had against Illinois. I mean, if you can play good, clean football, you don't have to have a playbook that's this thick on week 1. What you need to do is play good, clean football, not make those big mistakes, do the basics well, and you're going to, as long as you don't have some crazy talent differential, which we absolutely we should have the talent. We should have the talent advantage against the first 2 teams we play, even though both of them are on the road, Minnesota and Colorado. But I
think Whipple maybe even said it last year, is like first games are more often lost than they are won, and meaning that it's by your own fault that you lose the game as opposed to just how they win or lost. But
it's crazy. We focus so much on records, as we should. Records are determining how good and bad you are. But man, we were up double digits in the fourth quarter against Wisconsin. We were up double digits at halftime against Minnesota. We were up double digits in the third quarter against Northwestern. We lost to Georgia Southern, for cripe's sakes. I mean, the concept that we were what we were. We deserved the record that we got, but you do the basics right, and I think the race to 6 is going to happen, and hopefully even sooner than week 10, 11, or 12.
I'm ready to turn the corner for sure.
Well, let's turn the corner on this one, Mac. Let's get to our parting shots. What do you got?
Well, this is such an impromptu. I didn't really have a parting shot per se. No, I don't have one. I'm sorry. Everybody stay safe. Spade neuter your animals. I don't know. That's a Bob Barker one, I guess. I don't know. I'm out. I'm sorry.
I wrote down 2 things for me.
Of course you did.
Well, no, we started off talking with basketball. And again, sell out the next 2 games here at PBA fans. Let's get there.
Yes.
This team can get above 500 on the season if they win the next 2 home games against Maryland and Minnesota. Those are winnable games. They're losable games. Let's win them. Let's get above 500.
This is the race to the NIT.
The race to the postseason. That's how the remainder of this season is. So, we started with basketball, of course, because we're the Mats. We focus 99% of it on football. I do want to mention baseball starts this weekend, so that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So now we're going to hopefully start getting into some of that. And then last but not least, Friday night, watch CBS News.
Okay.
The very end, there's the Steve Hartman always does on the road. And by the way, every time I watch one of those ones from him, I always cry because it's like the best. It's the last 5 minutes of the Friday CBS News, and they're just heartwarming stories. Well, this week he's doing it on Malachi Coleman.
Oh,
and the amazing story that Malachi has, from his childhood and being adopted, and what he's doing with his NIL money and giving that to kids in foster. I mean, I don't even want to give it away because I want to watch it and just enjoy it.
He seems like a good kid.
So my DVR is set. Set yours, Redcasters out there. Enjoy that. But other than that, Mac, you got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right. Well, until we see you next time, whenever the heck that's going to be, this has been another Match Rule.
A Herd at Sports Network production.